Good morning. This is Jen, the Liberty Lion. This morning I want to talk to you about artificial things and jurisdiction, power, authority, and this idea that legal things are fictional things. So you have jurisdiction, which is power or authority, and you have legal jurisdictions. So the way I understand power and authority is that there is one person or one being who has actual authority, and that's whoever created the thing or the person or the animal. So we know that there's something out there that created the universe and everything in it. And that's the ultimate creator. Now, there's maxims that go back to the very beginning of the legal system that state that whatever you create, you're supposed to control that. You're the one that's controlling that. So people create states, and people are supposed to control the state. The states created the federal government, and the states are supposed to control the federal government. The federal government are supposed to regulate the military and regulate some relationships for specific purposes. So what I want to help people understand is that there are legal relationships that are artificial. They're not considered authentic. So when a man has a wife and he has children with her, whether they're married or not, whether they institutionalize their marriage or not, they are an authentic couple, authentically married, whether you legalize it or not, and they have their authentic offspring. Authentic are things that spring from nature naturally. Then you have a legal system. So you have this legal system where governments acknowledge those relationships. Now, it is said that when a man or a woman or a couple adopt a child, it's called a legal adoption because it's not their authentic child that came from them by way of their coming together in a natural union, naturally. So it's not a natural biological child. It's a child that we all agree we're going to pretend is their child. And that's a legal child through legal adoption. So when something is legalized, we're saying we're all going to agree to pretend that something is real, even though it's not. And this is sort of the foundation, you could say, for the legal system that has been around since the very beginning of legal writings. So everything in nature you don't have to write down, but you can write down. But everything not in nature, such as legal things, which are artificial things, are written down. They have to be written down for people to be able to see it and acknowledge it. Since it's pretend things or imagined things and imagined relationships with imagined governments and imagined authority, not coming from God, but coming from man, it has to be written down so we can acknowledge them. So an adoption is a fiction. It's not authentic, but it's real because things not in nature, but between men can be considered real because it's a legal adoption. So it's not authentic. It's not in nature. It's imagined. It's our theater, the things we agree we're going to do. So it's as if, quote, as if, or like, or similar to. And we do these things to sort of go from one place to another place. So, for example, a corporation, originally corporations were supposed to come about as a means to an end. Okay, so they were at some point supposed to end, and they're supposed to start, they're supposed to do what they intend to do, and then they end, because nothing can live into perpetuity. Nothing can live forever. Everything has to die. To be alive, everything has to, at some point in time, die. So corporations, they're born, they're real. They live for a period of time to get something done, and then they're supposed to die. They're supposed to end. So Thomas Jefferson said in his letter to Madison in, I think, 1789, that debts die, and debts belong only to the living. And once that person who contracts the debt dies with them. And so also the fictions created by that generation, the legal things that they have agreed that they're going to play into, those things live during that generation for those people, and then they die. So when the next generation is born, they get to create their fictions also. So when we have laws that last 20, 40, 60, 80 years, or banks or institutions or governments that last all these years throughout all these generations, we're robbing the next generation of its right to create its fictions for themselves. Okay, so the dollar is the fiction. The Federal Reserve note based on debt is the fiction. And the papers are their fictions. All their forms, all their laws, all their everything, they're all fictions. And fictions must at some point in time die. They have to, because one generation cannot bind the next generation. And that's something that we see in natural law, and natural law is always above man's law. It always comes first. Natural law can be written down, but writing it doesn't change it. Writing it only acknowledges it. Man's law must be written down. And this is a problem I have with them saying ignorance of the law is no excuse. Well, what law are they talking about? Are they talking about the natural law? Or are they talking about the laws that they created for themselves back in 1933 or 1872 or 1787? What laws? And why should I be obligated to know those laws if they're not part of my fiction? So they're fiction as if they were real. And if they're not real and they're made for the people of the time, and I'm not familiar with their lives and their realities and their fictions, then why should I be obligated to know and understand their fictions? They say ignorance of the law is no excuse, but I'm certainly ignorant of those things that were created before I was even born. And I shouldn't be obligated to have to go back in time 200 years and read all the laws that were created before me so that I can understand what's going on now. And neither should you. So when they say ignorance of the law is no excuse, and they also say you can't practice law, and talking about the laws, reading the laws, discussing the laws is practicing law. Well, it's not practicing law, because if I don't read them and discuss them and learn them and understand what they mean, and then you tell me ignorance of the law is no excuse, now you're compelling me to do an impossibility, which brings in the natural law, because it's only natural that man cannot be compelled to do something that's impossible. So to understand the IRS code, or to understand things that aren't discussed with you, or to understand things that were written 200 years before you were born, or to understand 20,000, 30,000, 100,000 pages of documents that was written in 1933, is compelling you to do something that's impossible, which goes against natural law or reality. Our reality is not that we cannot do those things. We cannot understand those things, and we cannot be forced into a situation where we can't discuss, we can't educate, we can't learn from each other, because then you're quote unquote practicing law. Okay, so if we learn the law that we're supposed to know, we're practicing law. And if we teach the law after we know it, or we think we know it, we're practicing law. But if they bring you into court, they say ignorance of the law is no excuse, which is compelling man to do something that's impossible. You're telling me I have to know the law, but then you're telling me I can't learn the law, and I can't discuss the law, and I can't be educated in law. Okay, so then they tell you, well, you got to get a lawyer, you got to get an attorney. Well, I don't have to, because there's nothing in nature that says I have to do that. And it's not in the natural law, and the natural law is supposed to be higher than man's law. So man's laws are supposed to conform to the natural law. So if they say, well, you have to get an attorney, where in nature does it say that I have to get an attorney? And they say, well, so they lock you into this situation that makes no sense, and you can't get out of it unless you know stuff. So today I'm going to be talking about a couple things. I'm going to be talking about jurisdiction, power, and authority, and I'm going to talk about conflict of laws, and I'm going to talk about comity, and where the comity clause is in the Constitution, as well as what it means, and what law is higher, the state or the federal. And so I'm going to be talking about that today. I'm going to be posting a couple of books if you choose to read them. I'm also going to be talking more about fictions, and the fictions in law, the legal fictions that they use, which is basically their theater to get them from one place to the next place. They use theater or legal fictions as a means to an end, and how it's gotten so out of hand that there's no way that anybody could possibly know the fictions, and everything in court is basically just a fiction. So if you want to learn more about that, then that'll be my next video, will be today or tomorrow, posted here on YouTube. So like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment, and I will get back to you guys later.